This is the story of a simple, everyday fisherman named Eric, a guy who, just like clockwork, every single morning would take his little boat out into the open ocean and spend his days catching fish. It was just his routine. But on one particular day, everything around him changed in an instant. Even though the weather was completely clear when he set out, within just a few short minutes, a thick, heavy fog rolled in from every direction. Out of nowhere, and Eric completely lost his way. That's when, off in the distance through the water, he spotted an old, eerily quiet, and completely abandoned-looking ship just floating there. Driven by curiosity, he tied his little boat to the side of that vessel and made the decision to climb aboard and take a look inside. The moment he stepped foot on that ship, his skin crawled. Every single hair on his body stood straight up. The entire ship was completely dead silent, not a single sound. And here's the thing that made it even stranger. Everything on that ship looked completely fresh and recently used. Food was laid out, the dishes were clean, the clothes were folded and placed neatly, and in several spots around the ship, it genuinely looked like someone had been standing right there just moments ago, but there was absolutely no one in sight. Eric tried to start up the ship's engine, but it didn't respond at all, just completely dead. Finding himself face to face with an empty ship in the middle of this massive ocean, his mind started spinning with anxiety. He grabbed a pair of binoculars and tried to scan the area around him. Maybe he'd spot another boat or some kind of signal for help, but the fog had gotten so thick and dense that he couldn't make out a single thing. Finally, he made his way to the control room and tried reaching out for help over the radio. He sent out a message saying the ship was stranded in the middle of the ocean and that if anyone or anyone at all could hear his voice, they needed to respond immediately. After sending out that radio message, Eric headed back toward the deck to return to his own boat. But the second he looked down over the side of the ship, his face went completely pale. His own little boat, the one he had tied up securely, was just gone, vanished, even though he had tied it up tight himself. And not just that, the thick, heavy fog that had been surrounding everything just a few minutes ago had suddenly disappeared without a trace, and the sky had gone completely clear. It was now the middle of the afternoon. Eric had absolutely no idea how or when any of this had happened. He had no other choice now. He went back inside that mysterious ship and started studying the maps and charts, desperately trying to figure out exactly where in the world he had ended up. It didn't take long before he realized something terrifying. Without fixing the engine, getting out of there was going to be impossible. He searched the entire ship for tools, and after hours of grueling, exhausting work, he actually managed to get the engine running again. It was the most relieved he had felt the whole time, but the trouble was far from over. He tried to get back on the radio to make contact again, and once again, not a single response. Worn out and drained, Eric made his way up top and suddenly felt the urge to use the restroom. Since there was no one around, he figured he'd just take care of it over the side of the ship. But the moment he stood at the edge, someone shoved him hard. He went straight down into the ocean. The current was strong and the wind pressure was brutal. He fought with everything he had to get back to the surface, and with tremendous difficulty, he managed to grab onto a railing. He hadn't even fully caught his breath when he had to go back down to use the bathroom. And that's when someone slammed the door shut. At first, Eric figured the wind must have done it, but when he tried to get out, he found the lock was bolted from the inside. His breath caught in his throat. He tried everything to get that lock open, even pulled out a pin from his pocket and tried to pick it. Nothing worked. That's when it truly hit him. He was not alone on this ship. There was someone or something on board that he couldn't see, but that was there with him every single moment, circling around him. The intent of this unseen force to mess with him and terrorize him was becoming crystal clear. He banged on the door and screamed out, "Whoever you are, please just open this door. I only came to look around." But he got nothing back, not a word. Terrified and trembling, he made his way toward the cabin. And what he saw when he got there made his blood run ice cold. Bloodstains on the floor. The atmosphere was so horrifying that any normal person would have turned and run screaming. But Eric pulled himself together, grabbed a pair of scissors, and started working to get the door open. That's when the entire ship suddenly began violently shaking and rocking, like something catastrophic was about to happen. Paralyzed with fear, he ran upstairs and looked out through a porthole. In the distance, a massive cargo ship was barreling toward them at full speed, heading directly their way. A head-on collision was inevitable. Eric realized that if that ship hit them, there was no way he was surviving this. He pulled off his shirt and waved it hard through the air, but that massive ship simply couldn't see him. He had one option left: stop the ship. That's when his eyes landed on a long rope hanging near the window. His mind instantly clicked with an idea. He tied the rope together and threw it down into the water, hoping it would drag against the propeller and slow the ship down. But But that only made things worse. The rope got caught in the engine's blades and started getting sucked inward, and the loop of it wound itself directly around Eric's throat. The force of the pull cut off his air, but in the very last possible second, he grabbed a tool and cut through the rope, somehow saving himself. After the rope nearly strangled him to death, Eric's neck was completely red and raw. His air had been cut off, and he had come within inches of dying. But in that final desperate moment, he gathered the last bit of strength left in him and broke free. The rope getting tangled in the engine had slowed the ship down, but that relief only lasted a few seconds, because the massive cargo ship coming at them showed absolutely zero signs of stopping. Within just a few seconds, that heavy ship crashed into Eric's vessel with a bone-crushing impact. The collision was so violent that the entire small ship lurched and shook, and Eric went crashing down to the floor. He took a deep blow to the head and blacked out instantly. When he came to a little while later, he found himself back in that same bathroom, where the water had now risen almost up to his neck. But what terrified him the most wasn't even the water level. It was the fact that the water wasn't salty like ocean water at all. It was completely fresh and clean, like someone was deliberately and methodically breaking him down, step by step, with calculated precision. Broken, beaten, and utterly defeated, Eric started to beg, "Whatever you are, please, just let me go." But the same dead silence filled every corner of that ship, the same silence that always managed to terrify him even more. Exhausted and dehydrated, he drank the remaining water left in the shower, but it ran out within seconds. When he tried drinking directly from the tap, the taste had changed. It was now salty. That's when it clicked. Somewhere on that ship there was a leak, and the ocean water was getting in. The moment that registered, his panic spiked all over again, because it meant this ship wasn't going to stay afloat much longer. He tried to open the door, but it was locked from the outside. It felt like some invisible force had its eye on his every single move and was deliberately stopping him from getting out. By the time night fell, the water was steadily rising, and Eric was completely spent. Eventually, exhaustion took over, and his eyes closed. During the night, a fierce storm swept over the ocean. It rocked the ship from the inside out and left Eric with several new injuries. When his eyes opened in the morning, the water had reached his face. Just a few more inches and he would have drowned. And then, suddenly, he heard a faint, quiet clicking sound, like a lock coming undone. He turned the handle as best he could, and at that moment the water pressure was so intense that the door completely blew off its hinges and collapsed inward. That same violent rush of water actually gave him the opening he needed to get out, and somehow he made it all the way up to the ship's roof just to breathe some fresh air. By this point, Eric was completely certain. This was no ordinary ship. Some invisible, supernatural force was controlling it, and for whatever reason, it absolutely refused to let him go. Both physically and mentally, he was shattered. The water below was still rising, and the ship could go under at any moment. In the middle of that fear, an idea came to him. He grabbed the airbags he found on the ship and the broken bathroom door, and out of those, he built himself a small makeshift raft. Then he tied everything together tightly to make it sturdy, gathered food, water, and tools from around the ship, loaded it all onto the raft, and without looking back, not once, he left that ship and started paddling out into the ocean. But even after several hours had passed, he hadn't gotten very far from the big ship. The strangest part was that the ship, which he had watched appearing to be sinking just that morning, was still sitting there in the exact same condition. No movement, no tipping, nothing. He couldn't wrap his head around how, with that much flooding and that much water inside it, it still wasn't sinking. That's when a thought hit him. If it hasn't sunk yet, why not just fix it and use it? He paddled back to the ship, first patched up the leak, then rigged up a temporary pump using pipes and tools, and slowly, painstakingly, pumped all the water inside back out into the ocean. After that, he repaired the rest of the damaged parts of the boat so nothing else would go wrong down the line. He went back to the radio one more time and tried to reach someone for help, but yet again, not a single soul responded. Exhausted and deflated, he returned to the control room and went back to looking at the maps. When he finally started the engine, his hopes crumbled all over again. The ship didn't move a single inch. It was like the ocean itself had glued it to that exact spot. He was completely broken, and that's when, off in the distance, he spotted another ship. The moment he saw it, a flicker of hope reignited inside him. He grabbed his raft and started paddling toward it with everything he had. But suddenly, that ship started moving toward him, dangerously fast, like some invisible hand was pushing it right at him. Eric picked up speed, but the big ship only got faster. Right before impact, in one last desperate attempt, he launched himself off the raft and into the ocean, swimming as hard as he could toward yet another boat he spotted drifting in the distance. But by the time he reached where it it should have been, it was gone, completely vanished. He was now fully convinced whatever was on that mysterious ship was evil, and it was not going to let him leave under any circumstances. He swore to himself, even if it cost him his life, he was never going back to that ship. But the ocean water was slowly getting colder. His body was starting to go numb. Dolphins were swimming below him. But the conditions had gotten so bad that staying in the water any longer was simply impossible. Shaking from the cold, completely helpless, Eric finally made the forced decision to swim back toward the very ship he'd been trying to escape, the one he had no choice but to return to. He was so weak and sick at that point that he didn't even have the energy to think. He quietly wrapped himself in a blanket in one of the ship's rooms and drifted off into a deep sleep. The next morning, when Eric opened his eyes, his first and only thought was that he had to get off this nightmare ship, no matter what. But the moment he stood up and took a step toward the door, his heart sank. The room door was locked again. He was trapped inside. This new setback broke him even further. He had no idea why this ship kept doing this to him. What force had imprisoned him here? That's when his eyes drifted to a small wooden cabinet built into the corner of the room. The second he opened it, he saw a narrow passageway going upward, a ventilation shaft that just might, lead to the outside. Eric crawled into that tiny cabinet, which turned out to be an incredibly tight, dark, and dust-filled storage area. He tried climbing up over and over again, but kept slipping and falling back down. Every fall left new cuts and bruises on his back, his hands, his legs, but he didn't stop. After falling again and again, picking himself back up again and again, he finally made it all the way up to the ventilation window. He pushed against it with every ounce of strength he had left, shoved it, rattled it, but it didn't budge even a little. It felt like someone had intentionally locked it shut from the outside. And on top of that, he realized the air inside the sealed space was thinning out fast. Breathing was becoming harder by the second. The way back down was also blocked since the door behind him had closed shut. It started to feel like this might actually be the end for him, his final resting place. And then, once again, that same mysterious clicking sound echoed through the shaft, the exact same sound he had heard several times before. And just like that, the ventilation window swung open all on its own. Eric didn't waste a single second. He burst through it and pulled himself outside. The cold, fresh outside air rushed into his lungs, and for just a brief moment, everything felt calm. When he looked down from up there, he realized the ship was quietly, all on its own, moving toward a small, deserted island. A tiny spark of hope lit up inside him. Maybe this was his chance, his real chance, to finally escape this cursed ship. The moment the ship touched the shore, Eric jumped off immediately. The second his feet hit solid ground, he felt deep in his gut that the answer to this entire mystery was hidden somewhere on this island. He grabbed a wooden stick from the path and started searching in every direction. But within moments, he realized this island was completely barren. No huts, no signs of fire, no footprints. There wasn't even a remote possibility of another human being here. The anger he'd felt melted straight into fear. Who on earth is behind all of this? Just as he stepped beyond the edge of the island, his eyes landed on something startling. That same mysterious ship, the one that had carried him all the way here, was now calmly, steadily moving across the surface of the ocean, like it was out there hunting for its next victim. Seeing that, Eric became absolutely certain this ship was not controlled by any human being, but by some dark and dangerous force. If he wanted to stay alive, he needed to find a way off this island, and fast. He explored and searched until he climbed all the way to the highest peak on the island. From up there, he could see another island in the far distance, but it was so far away he couldn't make out what was happening over there. He turned back and started making his way down the other side of the island, and then his breath completely stopped. He had just arrived at the exact same spot where the whole thing had begun. The same shoreline, the same surroundings, and the most jaw-dropping thing of all, his own little boat was tied up right there, in the exact same condition he had left it on day one. And the people standing around were going about their everyday business like absolutely nothing had happened. Eric stood there completely stunned. He could barely believe what his own mind was telling him. Was everything he'd gone through, the horror, the ghost ship, the locked rooms, the voices, the near-death moments in this deserted island, was any of it real? Or was it all some kind of terrifying hallucination? But his wounds, his exhaustion, his labored breathing, and his raw lived experience were telling him loud and clear, this was no dream. Now the real question remained, how did his boat end up back there? And what is the true secret hiding behind this mystery island? Eric was actually haunted by a supernatural force, or was it all just in his head? Drop a comment below and tell us. Don't forget to smash that like button, hit subscribe, and ring that bell icon.